we basically started as like an Instagram page and like an internet presence of being like, we are a group of young people who care about this. That was kind of like all it began as.
The pitch.
And then one landowner on the border of Surrey and Sussex reached out to us and was like, I'm thinking about doing this on my 40-acre plot. Like, would you be interested in coming in being a partner? And we obviously jumped on that opportunity. Again, this is all like hobbyist, and we set up something that we call like a youth-led rewilding or nature recovery project. That was like our first kind of proof of concept. And essentially the way we do that is we set up the project like as it's where we try and involve young people at every single stage. So from including in our planning, in our implementation, in our management. So every so when we're doing a plan for a project, we'll have young people shadowing, inputting that like into the decision-making project, and then all of our implementations are done with these big volunteer days, where we might be planting trees, or we might be doing soil sampling, or tearing down fences, and then on that project we've like built a big outdoor classroom out of some old materials that were left on the site. And now that it's a bit further down the line, we're also doing all of the monitoring of the project is being run as like lessons in how to do surveying. And so in that sense, it's like we're trying to make sure at all points in the project it's doing two things at once, right? Like, so we're monitoring what species are on the site and how we've made an impact, but also trying to involve young people in that process and teaching them how that works. So that's kind of one example.
One like really cheesy way we've recently been conceptualizing that kind of determination to use every opportunity as like an upskilling and involvement lever is that we're rewilding land. Like, we have a bunch of projects. The acreage isn't huge, but like there's an amount of like nature we're bringing back just through our work. But then the cheesy phrase that I'm hesitating to say because it's so cheesy, but is rewilding like a generation. Because I think we need young people to. It's not just a nice thing to do, and it is a really nice thing to do. But we need loads of young people who understand how this process works. We need loads of young people who have the skills to execute it. We need them to know each other and for there to be a community and for it to be a fun place that they want to be as well, which is a massive part of our work as well. So I guess we're kind of trying to help build like a young nature nerd army that's going to help the UK kind of get things back to where they should be.
And so we, like we were saying, we did this one project it's called Maple Farm, and it's been a huge success. And then like following on from that success, we've had lots of other landowners reaching out to us, basically asking us if we can do the same thing. And at the same time, by building our online presence and running a few engagement events, like we run an annual festival, and we're always doing talks and webinars and things to put our name out. We've got a bunch of young people from all around the country asking to get involved. So we now kind of have access to these tubules of energy for the first time. And so now we're taking on as many projects as we can possibly do, basically. So we're currently running 10 nature recovery projects all around the country, starting off mainly in southeast England, but we're now trying to spread as much as we can. And they range from, some are more like woodland creation, some are more like grassland restoration, river restoration, wetland creation. I don't think I missed anything out.
Flower meadow stuff.
Big
mix.
I mean, when I saw you guys on Leave Curious, what I liked about it, I mean, there was a lot of things that I liked, but you were talking about doing hedgerows. And what I thought was really cool was, I mean, I get the idea with hedgerows, but I'd always had this idea of rewilding's like this big, huge, massive thing, and then there's wolves are going to come back, and it's this, massive thing. But the way you guys were doing it, it was suddenly so much more accessible, right?
100%.
And made sense.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
that, also,
Yeah.
I thought Rob's next video that he
Yeah.
did was
Yeah.
a reflection on
The Christmas
rewilding as a concept, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of felt like, oh, I bet that he was influenced by you guys.
Yeah, no, it's a really big topic, and I think a lot of the rewilding success that we've seen in the UK that I was mentioning before, in terms of movement momentum, has been a willingness to play the cards as they're dealt. Because there's attempt to, like, the kind of gateway drug for rewilding, as I yapped on about in that video, is the like big predator reintroduction. It's this vision of these massive untouched landscapes, and all that kind of stuff is incredible. And to the degree that it inspires people, it's like worth its weight in gold. But I think in England, especially Southeast England, where most of our work happens, but then also in the rest of the UK, there's really specific, like, economic, like, kind of agricultural, like, just regularly cultural constraints. And there's so much awesome work you can do within those constraints that it feels kind of crazy for them to stop you. I mean, the hedgerows is really the dream example of this process. There's lots of others, but hedgerows is great because it takes up such little land, so it doesn't remove income for farmers. It's also, in a way that I don't fully understand by nature of not being a farmer, but also really good for farms. Like, it helps with erosion and it can protect things from the wind. Also, like, brings pollinators to farms, which is obviously really helpful. And it's really fun to do. It's like a hell of a day. We've done like maybe 8 or 9 hedgerow planting volunteer days, and it's insanely fun. And then you get another 1,000 trees minimum in the ground for a day. So it really is like one of those rare, like, win-win-wins. And at least we've noticed anyway, specifically just on the hedgerow point, that the public understanding of the importance of hedgerows has gone up massively in the last few years. And we've been working with a bunch of different organizations whose whole MO is just to do the hedgerow networks around England. And that alone will bring back incredible amounts of, like, farmyard birds and all these kinds of species that have been declining over the last 50 years. So that's like a really, productive and currently underway positive nature story we can report to any interested parties, that the hedgerows are going back in the ground, and it's something to celebrate.
And it was at least for us as, like, young people, with when we started this with no money and no access to land. The first thing we ever managed to do was planting a hedgerow. Because it requires very little sign up from the landowner. There's lots of ways to fund it. Lots of grant schemes, and it's something you can do with volunteers with very little skill. I guess to your point about just getting cracking with doing things, that was where we first started, because we had all the skills we needed to do it, and all we needed was, I don't know, just to do it,
just to get cracking. Absolutely, it's really cool.
Hey, I'm conscious of time. Have you guys got a few more minutes? Because I've got a couple more minutes. Yeah, cool. So what you're talking about there was the funding. How did that? Where are you guys getting your funding? Where did you first start thinking about funding, and was it easy enough to sort of get the initial funding, and then from there to get something that's regular? Because one of the problems with conservation work is the funding's often project based. So how do you maintain a team? So how did you sort of get over that hump? Or have you gotten over that hump?
I'll maybe make a more general point, and then I'll hand the reins to Noah, because Noah's the one who's really been in the funding trenches on all of that. But yeah, so the general point I'd make, and this is a point that I've yapped about kind of to anyone who'll listen over the last few years, is that when we were first kicking off and we were chatting to as many kind of older conservationists as possible to gather a bit of seen wisdom, a sentiment that we heard a lot was that you guys are in a very, although there's obviously lots of stuff to be concerned about, like the nature now is in a much worse state in the UK than it was 50 years ago, for example. But the really good news is that public support is here for nature in a way that's never been true previously. Like, the kind of hearts and minds have been won in a certain sense. People, like, appreciate its value as a thing and as a profession to help it. And then also, to your funding point, there's money available for this kind of work in a way that hasn't been true ever before. Which has been fantastic. It's been the wind in our sails right from the start, and it's made our organization possible. I don't think we could have founded it 10 years ago, for example, and certainly not before that point. In terms of the slightly more kind of fiddly grant stuff, like I mentioned, Noah's been leading the charge on that, and there's been like there's a bit of a division, like you mentioned, between projects and core costs.
I think when we started, we were obviously all just volunteering our time and working off of project grants. Like the first grant we got from like the Woodland Trust, and like that's something anyone can access. Their More Hedges scheme was the first little few £1,000s that we managed to access. And there's lots of similar schemes like that all across the country, really.
A lot Tree Council have got a good one that we've used a bunch.
So we found it quite easy to access like capital funds to buy trees, wildflower seeds, a few bits and bobs of materials we need. But like you say, we've only been officially a CIC for 2 years, and the funding is always a major challenge. But I think that where we've been successful in like the philanthropic side of things, winning some core cost grants, I think that climate change in general is such a huge and expensive problem that we were finding more and more people were saying, actually, with our few £1,000s, we could probably do more in the biodiversity space. And so we've had a few funders who've been supporting us like as an organization in like to cover our core costs, who have really focused on that side of things and see the value of community work in that space.
For sure. Those problems obviously often come hand in hand as well. And although we're more focused on biodiversity just by nature of like creating land uses that absorb more carbon, we're helping with climate stuff too. Another to just whine on one more moment about the kind of current momentum / like wind in our sails stuff is the biodiversity crisis hasn't really been getting as much attention as climate change. And actually it's a really interesting thing, because when I was working on chemical pollution during my master's, one thing my supervisor would often say to me is that the public consciousness on environmental matters, and probably other ones too, moves like in vogues, and like it kind of latches onto certain issues, but often, because people have all kinds of stuff going on in their lives, obviously can't hold more than a few like major environmental challenges in their head. So maybe it was like save the rainforest in the 2000s. Apparently chemical pollution had a big moment in the 90s when my supervisor was first entering the space. And then I guess last 15 years, climate change has been kind of top of the agenda, rightfully so. But we've been noticing at the kind of micro level that Noah just mentioned, and like macro in terms of media attention and stuff, that the biodiversity crisis, which is also massive and has huge ramifications outside of just nature, is getting a lot more attention too, and that's been really awesome.
But ultimately, I think as a small non-profit, funding is the limiting factor of everything that we do. And we're still learning in that space. But at the moment we're doing okay. We've just started to manage to grow our little team to have a few more amazing young people work with us. So we're really excited about that.
No, you guys have done a really incredible job, and it's cool. It's good to know that there's easy enough money to access for those beginning projects to get started. I mean, the next stage is another thing altogether. And maybe sort of thinking about wrapping up this conversation. How do you guys think about sort of going forward and sort of scaling up your impact, and what do you guys have planned? How do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we've spoken a lot about like the scaling thing, because it's not always clear. It hasn't always been clear to us whether it's our role as a small organization to try and scale to meet these large problems, or whether we're more helpful being a kind of niche organization and like working with bigger ones when we can and stuff like that. But I think, as Noah was mentioning, how we were kind of our own test case of like young idiots who wanted to do nature recovery and then like found a way to do it. I think we have this dream now, which we're developing more seriously. We're calling it our Wild Stewards program at the moment. And there's kind of like beginnings of it on a few of our projects. But basically our kind of end game dream at the moment, and this is what the next few years is going to be dedicated to, is having a system in place where we have all these messages from young people like keen like people who just like want to get stuck in, and these really lovely messages from well-meaning landowners too who want this work to happen. And we want to have like a really slick system in place where we can be like, okay, like you're from Warwickshire, there's 3 other young people in Warwickshire who want to do this. There's an awesome project just down the road where a farmer's giving over an unproductive field to some like forest regeneration, and I know you want to learn about that, whatever it ends up being, and just putting people in touch and basically functioning as a kind of facilitator. So we want to kind of like repeat ourselves like across the country as much as possible. And at least early signs that is like could work as a system are really good. And it's going to mean that our kind of challenge as an organization is much more of an organizational one rather than say like a kind of technical environmental one, which it has been up to now. But yeah, I think we're really excited for it. Yeah, I think that's the dream. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that, like with your analysis, that would be the appropriate way for you guys to scale your impact, is to do it like that, like to get other groups exactly like yourselves and help them to get up and have thousands of little groups like yourselves. You know, I mean, I kind of, this is a bit silly, I liken it to like the rock bands of the 70s. Like your groups of individuals, you know, all with slightly different styles and different sort of approaches, but all sort of linked by the same kind of cultural momentum.
That's awesome way of thinking about it.
I love that.
But yeah, mostly we've just learned so many lessons in the last couple of years that I think if we could give to other groups of young people as early as possible, they could go on to do even more than like we've managed to do in the last couple of years. So like that's kind of the dream.
Yeah, exactly. Impart the stuff we learned the hard way and kind of spread it in like a mechanistic but still kind of like warm and fun way. And just get those tools out to as many people as possible, as quick as possible, basically.